Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry to keep you waiting. Complicated business. Complicated.
Last night, Donald Trump said that he has already selected his vice president. Is it you?
Well, he and I haven't talked about it. So I would say this is, I've also gotten a lot of questions here in Iowa about whether, for the people who support me, would I consider Donald Trump as my vice president? So either way, he's a good man. I'm a good man. I think these are the two acceptable choices for the future of our America First movement. Now, I believe it's going to take somebody with fresh legs leading from the front. Let's see what happens here in Iowa, Benny. I think it's going to be a major surprise on Monday night. But either way, I'm in this for the country. Trump is in this for the country. He has my support if he's the nominee, and I expect his support if I'm the nominee. I'm worried, though, there's something deeper going on, Benny, is I think that the question of who's going to be Trump's VP bakes into it a kind of, I would say, false comfort that we shouldn't have right now. I mean, again, I think what they're doing is they want to narrow this down to a two-horse race between Trump and a puppet they can control. That puppet's name is Nikki Haley. It's hiding in plain sight. They want to eliminate Donald Trump and then trot in their puppet into the White House. That's how this game is being played. And so I'm refusing to sit here as a passive bystander watching that happen in front of our eyes. That's why I'm in this to the very end. And I'm going to be in this. I think it's going to take a leader who can take that apparatus on to take our movement forward, somebody with fresh legs. And I'm in this to the very end. I expect to be the next president. I hope it's not under the conditions that I just laid out, but God forbid something happened this year. I don't want our movement to look back next January and say, hey, were we surprised that happened? No, we're not going to have been surprised. We're going to say, what the heck were we thinking walking straight into that trap? Yes. And so I think if people open their eyes, last time it was a man-made pandemic. It was a rigged election, tech-rigged process leading up to it. This time they're going to stop at nothing. I mean, Benny, if you think these people are just going to let Donald Trump get back into the White House, anybody who thinks that, I would say, open your eyes. Actually understand they've been selling us the rope for a long time. They're going to use it to hang us tomorrow. These people will stop at nothing. And increasingly, I mean nothing to keep this man away from the White House. We can't fall for their trick. Our movement didn't start in 2016. It started in 1776. And so that's why I'm in this, and we're going to go the distance.
So you've obviously been hitting the trail. You've been dominating in number of events. I saw the graphic. It was really impressive. Like 250 events in Iowa compared to like dozens for other candidates. You've obviously been speaking to the people, and you've probably felt a great deal of the fear and pain that normal people have. And if you get outside your bubble, then you actually, if you leave Nantucket, if you leave Martha's Vineyard, then you actually realize that things are getting destroyed in this country at a very quick pace. And that people are really starting to worry for the first time in my life about their future. Now, this is evidenced by Michelle Obama in this hilarious clip where Michelle Obama, like weepily yesterday, did a podcast where she talked about the most terrifying thing in America right now is not inflation, it's not an open border, it's not fentanyl, it's not the Chinese or an ongoing multiple wars on multiple fronts. It's not the butchery that's happening to our children in schools. It's Donald Trump. Michelle Obama crying, and I'd like to get your reaction to this clip.
The things that keep me up because you don't have control over them. Mm-hmm. And you wonder, where are we in this? Where are our hearts? What's going to happen in this next election? I am terrified about what could possibly happen because our leaders matter. Who we select, who speaks for us, who holds that bully pulpit. It affects us in ways that sometimes I think people take for granted.
It's so terrifying. That's the thing that keeps her up in Martha's Vineyard. In one of their multiple palatial mansions on the beach, not the global warming that will, of course, consume her mansion, but Donald Trump. Is that what you have sensed on the road? Is that what people tell you?
That's not what my sense is from having traveled this country. And you know what? If you count the smaller events we've done, Benny, it's 390 some events here in Iowa. Wow. What she's saying, she's scared. I was waiting for her to say, I'm shaking. That was her Van Jones impression, I suppose, which is what Van Jones says about me. It's what she's saying about, effectively, she appears to be saying it about Trump. This is artificial. This is artificial nonsense. People in this country aren't buying it. I do want to say one thing, actually, now that I'm watching her saying that it seems like, a lot of people read that as she might be floating her own puppetry as the volunteer to be the puppet who they prop up. And the only thing I will say as a caveat to what I said earlier is, what I think is going on in the DNC is, you got the people who are propping up the establishment. They've lost their use for Joe Biden. But if they get Joe Biden out of the way, they have a Kamala Harris problem. So I think they've actually chosen to solve that by propping up Nikki Haley within the Republican primary. Get into a two-horse race, eliminate Trump one way or another, and trot in Haley. If clearly the backup plan to that is then Michelle Obama, who then solves their Kamala Harris problem because she has certain things in common with Kamala Harris that the Democratic Party needs to have as boxes that are checked for the people who they're placating and distracting with woke smoke to actually foist on them foreign wars and a surveillance state that the left used to not accept, except they now do if you put up women of color to say that they're the ones who are your spokespersons. So that's kind of the deeper game that's going on is, if Nikki Haley as puppet in version 1.0 of the GOP primary doesn't work out, that's what they're playing for. Get it, Trump and Haley, knock out Trump, trot in Haley as puppet number one. Michelle Obama is clearly who they're cultivating as backup plan number two. Puppet number two is waiting in the wings to do it. So that's, I think, what's going on there. But this, I'm shaking nonsense. You know, I had some views to Van Jones on that one that I shared at AmFest, and I would encourage Donald Trump or whoever else Michelle Obama's talking about to tell her much the same.
Yeah, you told him to go F himself. Very big time Elon Musk energy.
Close to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so some people that really are getting completely effed is some of the DEI and some of the forced racism that is happening at your alma mater, right? Harvard, pushed by the Obamas, and you're seeing some major sea changes there. And you're seeing a number of woke billionaires coming out being like, I didn't know I was supporting actual racism. F this. Not doing it anymore. Bill Ackman, who's now sounding more like a Vivek donor, to be quite honest with you. And so it's like, what, how do you capture that? How do you harness that? Does that really that seems to be adding quite a bit to the pressure of 2024, because the entire regime could collapse, right, if they don't get the result they need in the election.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's why they're panicking. And I think that's why these people will increasingly stop at nothing. I mean, when you think you're on the moral high ground, that's what leads people to ratchet up. And if you think that your morality requires you to violate the rules of the present, then they're going to stop at nothing because it's about the higher morality to them. It's a religious worldview of the modern doctrine of the regime. And so that's why they don't have to abide by the normal rules or increasingly even the normal laws, which is why I say they'll stop at nothing. Now, the Claudine Gay thing, there's so much there. I mean, everyone's talked about, myself included, the affirmative action element of this. I mean, this woman would not have gotten her job in a million years if it weren't for her genetics, her race, and her gender. She's, in the last 20 years, written like 10 papers and 0 books. I've written more books and more articles in the last couple of years on the side while building businesses than this woman has as a supposed academic for her entire career over 20 plus years. And even turns out half the articles she did write were just copy and paste of other people's articles. So she would have never gotten that job. But there's a deeper issue here that doesn't have to do with the race and gender. She was a product of bureaucracy, actually, Betty. She wasn't even somebody who was a real academic in any true sense of the word. She rose through the bureaucracy ranks at a university. And so when we think about this rot known as the swamp, right? The swamp does not just exist in Washington, D.C. It doesn't just exist in the government. It exists in every sphere of our lives. And so that's, I think, part of what we have to wake up to, is it's not just the swamp in D.C. It's the swamp in our universities, in the DEI training sessions, in the HR departments of corporate America, in K-12 education, in the teachers' unions, in unions of many other kinds as well. It's not just in the public sector alone. It's a horizontal managerial class, the transnational institutions, people who staff up the UN, NATO. It goes beyond traditional partisan boundaries. It goes beyond just the public sector to private sector. It even goes beyond national boundaries. It's the same kind of people who become the associate dean of God knows what, who then become the ambassador to some second-rate country abroad, who then become the undersecretary of God knows what, who then become the vice president of something or other, an HR department and a consultant in corporate America sitting on some middling company's board. It's this horizontal managerial class that's crushing the will of the everyday citizen. That's really what this problem is all about. We call it the Great Reset, the dissolving of public and private sector boundaries to crush the citizen. That's what's going on in this country. And so I know we're getting into some heavy duty stuff there, but that's effectively how I see the real threat in this country. And Claudine Gay is just one more example of a manifestation, not just of the affirmative action agenda, but of that bureaucratic agenda in our institutions.
But it is a real threat, and it is actually crushing people, like the people who could be sitting on a United Airlines flight and have the door blow out because of DEI initiatives, right? How would you put a stop to that as president?
And affirmative action, period. And the president can do that. So there was an executive order, actually, that Lyndon Johnson wrote into the law. Not a lot of people know this. That's how affirmative action started. It was Executive Order 11246. That happens to be the number of it. Every Republican president could have canceled it, but every Republican president gets scared because they say that that's not the political hill they want to die on. Well, you know what? You can drag my dead body out of the White House sooner than me rescinding this. Okay, I'm going to get the right thing done for this country. End toxic racial discrimination. The best way to end discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. Cancel all those executive orders from the government that say that if you're getting federal money or if you're doing business with the federal government, that's 20% of the U.S. workforce working for such a company, you can't engage in race-based discrimination, period. Restore merit and meritocracy. As commander-in-chief, end a lot of that agenda in our own U.S. military. Clean house at the Pentagon. The General Mark Milley's of the world should have come nowhere near the Pentagon in the first place. They're blowing woke smoke to deflect the left, who the left used to be the ones criticizing them for the Iraq War. They placate the left with the DEI and affirmative action nonsense. And so it becomes this arranged marriage between the institutional bureaucrats that the left used to criticize, for everything from the 2008 bailouts after the financial crisis to even the wars in Iraq, which actually the left used to correctly criticize the Bush-Cheney fascist administration for. But what they created was a new arranged marriage between that permanent state and the left to give the left the woke smoke they need to inhale. But it placates the left from criticizing them from their own actual national security state and foreign policy overreaches. And so again, we're covering like book length, subject matter here in like a, 2-minute exchange, but that's what's going on in this country. And so I put an end to it in part by shutting down the bureaucracy, in part by rescinding the executive orders that created a lot of the toxic racialized agendas in the first place. And I think it takes a president, Benny, who actually understands the detail of this. Yes, an outsider who comes in with sharp elbows and can break things. And I broke the debate stage in the same way I'll break the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. But it's also going to take somebody who knows and understands the law and the Constitution. And I think you need both to get it done. And they're telling me I got to roll, man. We're arriving at our next stop here in Iowa.
Thankfully, you're not on a flight, so I'm not worried about the door blowing off because of a DEI hire. Well done, Vivek. Godspeed.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.